When I was 16, we lived in Morgan Hill, California. Just a standard house layout. When you stand at the kitchen sink, there's a window. It's just a couple of feet wide and a couple of feet tall. And that view looks out onto the street. So this one night when I'm about 16 years old, I was up really late on a Friday night, just, watching TV and stuff. The show I was watching ended at 3 a.m. I was getting ready for bed and I went downstairs to get a drink of water, so I'm standing at the sink. And I looked out. There were these neighbors that lived across the street. They rarely had company. So the sight of people either even going in or out of their house was unusual. But I never saw anybody there in the middle of the night. And that's what happened this time. There were 2 people standing in the middle of the neighbor's front yard, and they had their backs to me, which means that they were facing the house. They weren't talking. They didn't look like they were doing anything. It wasn't like they were breaking into the house. They looked like they were just standing there watching it. So I thought it was weird, so I'm just standing there watching them. As I'm doing that, I start to notice some rather peculiar things about these 2 figures that are standing out there. One was that their arms seemed to be disproportionately long. When I think about it, it could be that the shadow was casting on them from one of the streetlights nearby was casting shadows. But this is something I didn't notice until I saw one of them begin to move. They moved in a way that somebody would move if they were on crutches. But this person wasn't wearing crutches. It was using its arms to sort of like help itself move. When I saw that was when I became really alarmed, because I thought, this isn't just somebody trying to break into somebody else's house. This is something that I've never seen before. At one point, one of the figures turned and looked straight in my direction. And what I saw it's hard to describe. It was a blank face, is how I would put it. There were no features. And I was close enough so where I could have, if I had opened the window, we could have had a conversation. That's how close we were. So at that distance, I should have been able to see something. A nose, eyes, something like that, but it just appeared blank. And it wasn't a mask. At this point, the shock of coming sort of, face to face to no face with one of the beings outside, I think it must have shocked me. And I jolted, I dropped the glass, and I looked into the sink, just make sure I didn't cut myself. And when I looked up, they were gone. I turned around to go back to my room, and as I went, I noticed that the clock on the wall said it was like 4:05 in the morning. So I had gone down there at 3. And now I'm walking back up the stairs an hour later, after having only stood at the sink to get some water. That was the thing about it that most freaked me out. Not just seeing something unusual outside my house, but kind of having been transfixed by it for an indeterminate amount of time, in which I have no idea what happened. That was the last I ever saw anything like that at that house. And that's my story.
Welcome to the Castle of Spirits True Ghost Stories podcast, brought to you by castleofspirits.com, where you can read 4,600 and growing true listener and reader submitted ghost and paranormal stories. And if you would like to add your story to that massive pile, you can give us a call at our new paranormal hotline, 801-436-7838. Or you can just go to castleofspirits.com/submit and type it out like a Neanderthal. Whatever you prefer. We like them both.
I like the way you say Neanderthal correctly there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's not Neanderthal. It looks like Neanderthal.
I'm getting a little off track here. I am the ghost keeper, Jane.
And I'm the off-track ghost keeper, Vince.
He is. But you know, Vince, I'd like to read the phone number to the folks. The way that Art Bell used to give phone numbers. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
We'd listen to Art Bell, and he's, call the Sea Crane Company or whoever at 1-800-532. That's 1. So our phone number is 1-801-436-7838. That's 1-801-436-7838.
Ghosts are standing by.
They are.
That's awesome. So what are we doing here today, Jane?
So I think today we're going to do something a little different than normal.
Oh?
Yeah, we're going to read stories straight from the archive.
Oh, okay.
It turns out that's what we do here.
I thought that's what we did last week.
It is.
The week before that, and yeah.
How about I start us off with a story? This story is called This Is My House, submitted by Nicole in Utah in November of 2022. Back in 2009, my son was not quite 2 years old. I was newly married and living in my in-laws' basement while we searched for a home. My son slept in the room just down the hall, about 15 feet away from our door. One night, around 12 a.m., we were relaxing in bed and about to turn in when my son burst into the room, hysterical and terrified. He leapt onto the bed and started crying that there was a dead guy under his bed. I was confused and shocked by this because of his age and having had no exposure to death or the concept of death up until this point. We quickly attempted to calm him, and after 20 minutes or so, he finally settled and fell back asleep. The next day, I tried to take him to his room to assure him that nothing was there. I walked in, checked all the corners and hiding spaces, and told him I found no scary guys. He nervously crept as far as the doorframe, squatted down, pointed under the bed, and said, "No, dead guy under there. Scary." That was enough for me. I closed the door and we steered clear for a few days. Eventually, he started sleeping in there again, but would still complain on and off about the scary dead guy. We purchased and moved into our first home a few months later, January of 2010. For several months, he didn't complain about the dead guy again. I was relieved and thought we'd moved on. Until one night when he wouldn't settle down for bed and said he was scared of the dead guy who stood in his closet at night. This turned into an almost daily complaint. Sometimes he was in the closet. Sometimes he floated above his bed. Sometimes he stood outside, tapping on the window. He wasn't yet 3 at this point. We encouraged him to advocate for himself, and that if he ever felt threatened by the scary guy, he should tell him, "This is my house, and you're not welcome here." One day, just the two of us were home alone. He was playing in his room, and I was in the kitchen making lunch. Suddenly, I hear, "This is my house, and you need to get out." I froze, and my stomach dropped to my feet. I rushed in and asked him if everything was okay. He proudly told me, I made him go away. If only that had been the end. This continued for another year or so. things would be quiet for a few days, maybe even a few weeks. But then the scary guy would be back. I asked him to describe what he looked like. He said it was a guy, but he could only see him from the chest up. The rest was shadows, and where his eyes should be was just black holes. He would draw pictures of stick figures with black around them and black holes for the eyes. Absolutely unnerving. One day, I mentioned what we'd been dealing with to a coworker, who relayed the story to someone she knew that ran a paranormal team. He approached me one day and asked if we would be interested in having them come check out our house and see if they could help. I gladly accepted, and they came out a few weeks later. They spent a good 45 minutes in the room, trying to connect with the scary guy, and felt that they had found something. A neutral spirit who didn't seem to be harmful, but maybe not always truthful either, who was attached to my son, not the house. He seemed more curious and lonely than anything. They felt it was possible my son could be a medium. After they left, things were quiet for about a week. But then, not only was he complaining about the scary guy, but several others. I knew this was a possibility, but it was so frustrating. I didn't know what else to do at this point. We had tried salt sprays, asking them to leave, cleansing, blessing the house. One day, when it was just me at home, I sat down and just repeatedly asked them to leave. They weren't welcome. We'd had enough. It had been around 3 years at this point, and while I never felt particularly threatened or uncomfortable in my house, it bothered me that my son was still scared by these things. That night, he still complained about them being present, and I went to bed feeling defeated. Then I had a dream, a very vivid dream. I was lying in bed, and in my closet stood a man who was visible from the chest up, with black holes where his eyes should be. He said, "I'm your son's scary guy. I'm not here to harm him. I'm just lonely, and he can see me." I told him, "I know who you are, and you're not welcome here. You scare my son, and you need to leave and never come back." He vanished, and I immediately woke up. I stared hard into my closet, but nothing was there. I didn't mention this dream to my son until he was 12 years old, but he never once complained about him or any other visitors again. Thank you again to Nicole in Utah for submitting This Is My House in November of 2022.
There's something really scary to me about imaginary friends. Did you ever have an imaginary friend?
I think we've talked about this before. I guess I kind of did. I would carry on conversations, but I don't remember seeing anyone or having any kind of a concept about who this person was or what they looked like.
Yeah, I've heard people say that they remember seeing another kid or another person. I've
heard that too, but I never experienced that.
Yeah, I never experienced that either.
But if you have, dear listener, we want to know about it.
Yeah, tell us what they look like.
Yeah, we want to know all about
touch 'em?
Your imaginary friend that you could actually see. Let's hear it.
Let's hear it for the ghosts.
Let's give the ghosts a hand.
Lest we digress, I gotta say that today you showed me a video that's circulating social media, and it immediately struck a chord with me because it was something kind of similar to what we experienced. Why don't you tell them about the video?
So it's a TikTok video that I came across on Facebook, and we'll link to it on our Facebook page. You can go there and find it. It's basically this person is saying that their neighbors across the street were away on vacation or a holiday, and this person noticed that the light in the garage was flashing on and off. And so they started filming it, thinking maybe somebody has broken into the house. They said that they had called the cops, and the cops came and looked, and they're like, there's nobody in the house. There's no sign of, forced entry, nothing like that. But in this video, you can see the garage light like flicking on and off really fast, and then it stops. And then every once in a while, you see this figure or like the head of a figure run past, like really fast. Like it's creepy fast. It doesn't look like somebody on foot just like running around like crazy in the room. It's like, it appears to be, to me anyway, like supernaturally quick. And I don't know.
And it's one of those
it's
garage
possible
doors
it's a
with
fake.
window, right?
Yeah, it's got the windows across the top of the garage door, so you can only see their head. It's completely possible that it's fake and that it's somebody just making something up, but it's a super creepy video. But also, Vince and I were particularly struck by it because we experienced something very, very similar.
There was a house sort of across the street from us that was empty because the previous tenant had moved out. And one night we noticed that the lights in the garage were flashing on and off really fast.
And they would stay off. And then they'd flash and then they'd stay on.
And we're looking and we're going, there's nobody living there though. So what's going on over there? And I decided that I had to go look.
So it's like the middle of the night.
And it's raining. And I go across the street and I'm like approaching this window, terrified of what I'd see. But more importantly, I was afraid that maybe somebody, maybe like somebody who was looking at the house or a realtor or something, maybe had fallen and broken something.
And they're like flashing the light, trying to get someone's attention.
And all they could do was flash the light. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be a hero or a Ghostbuster, one or the other, or a victim. And so I went over there, trepidatiously crept up to the window, peered inside and saw nothing. And the lights were still flashing. But then as soon as you looked in the window and you saw there was nothing in there, you lit back to our house like your ass was on fire. I think it was.
He like ran, like scurried, like throwing glances over his shoulder.
Yeah. Well, it's also the concern that, one of the neighbors might think that I'm like going to break into the house. I'm some random guy and then I get shot for looking through somebody's window. So I was like freaked out the whole time, but I was like proud of myself that I actually went out there.
Yeah. I was proud of you.
But
I didn't think you'd do it.
No video and no shadow figures darting back and forth.
No, that was really the element that we were missing out on, was the figure darting back and forth.
Yeah. One of these days we'll capture something like that. And then people can doubt us as much as we doubt them. Yeah. Fun times.
That's true. Hey, Vince, I was wondering if you had a story you'd like to read.
I do, in fact.
Okay, do it.
It's a story I'm not quite sure if it's a ghost story. I'm not quite sure it's a paranormal story. I think I'll read it to you and let you be the judge.
All right.
And then you tell me.
I'm good at being a judge. I'm judging you right now.
What? Serious? Anyway, the story that I have to read is called, What Was That? Or, alternately, What Was That?
What was that?
Okay, that's enough.
Oh.
It was submitted by Brianna Edwards in Texas in January of 2009. Rural Texas can be a scary place in the winter at night, even when things seem fine. I live in a small 3-bedroom home with my 2 children, my nephew, and his girlfriend. We live way off the beaten path, surrounded by woods and cow pastures. It's very dark, except for one yard light on my property. I don't know the history of this land or anything about the former people who lived here. They left behind a shed full of boxes and other items. The landlord told me I could clean it out, keep what I wanted, and throw away what I didn't want. A friend of mine took some things home with her. A few days later, she brought me an urn with ashes and bones in it. She said it was in a box of things she took from the shed. I asked the landlord if she knew where the former tenants were, but she didn't know where they'd moved to or even how to reach them. So my son took the ashes to the creek and buried them, hoping to put them to rest. Now, when I say my area was rural, I mean 25 miles from the nearest town. We're way out there. And about 75 yards from my back porch is a creek bed. I admit that there's all kinds of wildlife that roam this property in the woods, but I don't know how to explain this. Around 3 weeks after my son buried the ashes, one night after work, I picked up my daughter from my mom's. When I got there, she was on the phone with my son, and he was saying someone's in the woods behind the house walking around. We didn't think anything of it because there are cows on our property, but I picked up my nephew and his girlfriend and brought them home with me. When we got there, my son was obviously shaken and upset. He said he went out to get some firewood and heard someone walking around about 25 feet from the back door. So my nephew decided to investigate, and when he came back in, he said, "You have to hear this." My yard light doesn't reach the small group of trees where the sounds were coming from. It just fades to darkness and shadows. But there was definitely something or someone out there walking around. We could hear the leaves rustling under the footsteps, and the pace sounded like 2 legs walking and not a 4-legged creature. So my nephew took the car keys and moved the car where the headlights could shine into the trees so we could see what was walking around. As soon as the headlights were pointed at the trees, the sound stopped, but the headlights revealed nothing. So my nephew walked the few feet to the group of trees to take a look, but there was nothing there. We shrugged it off, forgot about it, and went to bed. Around 3 nights later, my 4 dogs were restless, wanting to go in and out. They would go into the backyard and bark continuously. Romeo, my male terrier, ran out to the group of trees, and I could hear him barking and running around. I could also hear something walking. My nephew once again got the keys and shone the lights on the group of trees, but all they revealed was Romeo, as if nothing else were there. So I got all the dogs back in the house except for one female, Reese's, who wound up not going to the trees but who sat behind my car barking. She would not come inside no matter how much we called her. Mind you, if this would have been a cow, we would have seen it in the headlights. Had it been a skunk, an opossum, or an armadillo, we would have heard it running instead of no sound when the headlights and the dogs disturbed it. Once again, we decided to shake it off and ignore it, but as hard as we tried, the air was still bad, and we could not shake an uneasy feeling of being watched. At around 2:30 a.m., we were awakened to the sound of a loud thump on the back door. We all jumped up in a frantic scramble and collided in the hallway. We were all freaked out, shouting, "What was that?" We could hear footsteps walking around the house, and the dogs were barking frantically. We all ran to different windows trying to see what was out there. No one could see anything, but the sound of footsteps continued. So we opened the front door to walk outside, but the footsteps stopped when we walked onto the porch. By now, we were really freaked out. The dogs were running around the house sniffing the ground, but there was nothing there. We quickly got them back inside the house and locked the doors. For the rest of the night, all was quiet, although we did not sleep for fear of the unknown. That morning, when the sun came up, we went out to investigate. On the back porch, in front of the back door, were 2 muddy, barefoot prints, although they were the only ones anywhere. We can't explain it. We now keep a very watchful eye on the woods behind our house. I don't keep my firewood in the backyard anymore, and I try to stay indoors at night, but there is always that ever-present feeling that we are being watched. Thank you to Brianna Edwards in Texas in January of 2009 with that true paranormal story. What was that?
So I have a question. You said barefoot prints. Do you mean B-A-R-E foot or B-E-A-R?
Oh, no. Barefoot prints.
Naked human feet.
Not bare footprints. Barefoot prints.
Right. Naked human feet.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like barefoot prints. It reminds me of the story that we read early on in the podcast. Will forever be probably my favorite story on the webs. Well, one of them. Out Past the Shadow's Edge.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a terrifying story. And this one struck me in the same way because, I mean, I don't think that sounds like a ghost. But the thing is, I don't think it sounds quite like an intruder because if you've got 5, 6, whatever dogs.
Which, by the way, I appreciated that at least most of the dogs had names that we were
Correct.
told.
Brianna did share.
She told
two
us
of
the dogs' names. Yes.
Because that's always important. Hey, dogs are people too.
They are.
They're not human, but they are people.
Yeah.
And we do love them so.
Yeah.
But a dog is a great deterrent to prevent somebody from breaking into your house. A pack of dogs is even better.
We need more dogs.
We have too many ghosts in this castle.
That's true.
We have too many dogs. It's going to get all mixed up.
Okay.
But I digress. So was that some sort of a Bigfoot? Was that some sort of I don't know.
I mean, it could have been a cryptid. It could have been a rake.
What's a rake? You mean a wraith?
No, a rake.
What's a rake?
So a rake is a cryptid, or I don't know if it's from creepypastas or whatever, but it's kind of humanish looking. It's very skinny. It's very pale. It's very lanky. But, it has all of the same type of features as a human. It's just, creepy.
I think I went to high school with a rake or two.
Oh, boy. So it could have been a rake.
And I mean, this also took place in Texas. And Texas is a very big state. You don't know where in Texas.
It's huge.
But I mean, there are stories of all kinds of wild men and Boggy Creek creatures. I don't think Boggy Creek was in Texas.
And wild women.
Wild men and women. And all sorts of manner of creepy, crawly things that live out there.
That was a good one. That's not a situation I would like to find myself in, especially being 25 miles away from town.
I know, right? It sounds peaceful, but it's also kind of terrifying too, because I don't know. I always think, hey, there's a hospital 3 miles away, right? I'm good. 25 miles? Oh, no.
Too far.
No. You could kill yourself if you stub a toe, if you don't get help quickly enough.
No, I don't think that's true.
I digress. Now, speaking of digressing, I think you may have another story to share with us.
I do, and I would like to tell the folks about it if you'll let me.
Oh, please do.
So this story is called A Winter's Night in Germany, submitted by Anonymous in Germany in April of 2006. A good friend told me this story that was told to her by her uncle when she was a teenager. Her whole family swears it happened. On a very cold winter's night in February 1943, the uncle, then a 13-year-old boy, his siblings, and their mother were sitting around the stove in the living room of their small farm in Saxony, Germany. The mother was knitting, and the children were quietly reading. Suddenly, they heard 3 loud knocks at their front door. Since they lived in a rural area and their next neighbor's farm was more than 2 miles away, they were scared and hesitated to open the door. Instead, they stayed quiet and listened. And what they heard next, they never forgot. They heard men quietly marching past their house. There must have been hundreds of them. They heard them walking past. Some were dragging their feet, some stumbling along. No word was spoken. These people walked in solitude, but the children could hear some of the men very subtly sighing, and some were breathing with difficulty. After minutes of listening to these silent men marching past, they were startled when somebody knocked 3 times on their door again. This time, the mother, though scared, decided that she couldn't ignore the person outside any longer. She opened the door, and there was nobody there. The moonlight fell on the surrounding fields, and there was absolutely nobody to be seen. There were no footsteps in the snow outside, and no footsteps or any traces on the road. It was very quiet. Weeks later, the mother was informed that her husband was killed that night in Stalingrad, Russia. My friend's father refuses to talk about this incident and leaves the room when it is brought up at family meetings. Thank you again to Anonymous in Germany for submitting A Winter's Night in Germany in April of 2006. Vince, I kind of threw you a curveball there, didn't I?
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have video. because I think at some point my jaw hit the floor. I looked at you like with just aghast.
Yeah, it's true. I was reading and all of a sudden I hear, and I look, and he's just got this wide mouth gape staring at me like, WTF. I had to do an extra take because he distracted me.
It was at the sound of hundreds of men marching by.
And in 1943.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Germany.
You know what that reminds me of, though?
World War II?
A little bit before that and a little bit after.
Oh, okay.
The deal is, it reminds me of a Twilight Zone episode.
Oh.
I wish I remembered the name. I'm a Twilight Zone. I'm a fan. I'm not an aficionado. But there was an episode that took place somewhere in the South, and this woman who lived in a house who lost her husband during the Civil War, this takes place during the Civil War, helped a soldier who was injured. I don't remember if he was a Union soldier or a Confederate, or if she was, on the Union side of the Confederacy. I don't remember. But there was a road just outside her house that was the main thoroughfare of all these soldiers, these wounded soldiers marching back home after the war had ended. And so as the story climaxes, progresses, comes to its end, one of the last people to come down the road is Abraham Lincoln. And so this road is, I don't know, a highway to heaven or something like that. I don't know. It's like a passageway to whatever lies beyond living. And it was a very poignant episode. And it totally reminded me of this. But your story you read was scary.
It was really scary. But it was also very sad, too.
It really was. And that was what reminded me of the Twilight. That Twilight Zone episode was very moving, very sad. But it also reminded me of the story I read, because they're like in the middle of nowhere and then you're knocking on the door. And I'm thinking, we didn't start off with a prompt or anything, did we?
No.
So we got a couple of in the middle of nowhere at night, far, far away from a hospital and the police. And
Vince is really concerned about his proximity to a hospital.
Hey, the older you get, the older you get.
Wow.
But that was a really good story.
Thank you. I mean, I didn't write it, but I found it.
Thank you to, was it Anonymous?
Anonymous in Germany.
They write a lot of stuff, don't they?
They write a lot of really good stuff.
They're a really good writer.
But you know who else is a good writer?
Who?
Our dear listener who's listening right now. And dear listener, we know that you have a story. It may not be your personal experience. It might be one your parents told you, or your best friend who doesn't listen to this podcast and has no intention of writing us. Or maybe it's a local legend where you live, or any number of those things. We think that you need to write to us and tell us your story. And if you don't want to write because you're busy, you only have time to call us for 3 minutes while you're driving to work, you can do that too. Leave us a voicemail and maybe we'll play it on an upcoming episode.
And just a little tip for people. If you're thinking that your story might take more than 3 minutes, it might be a good idea just to kind of plan out what you're going to say in advance. And if you get cut off, just call back and say, okay, this is part 2, because we're going to edit it together.
We could splice them together. We really could.
Yeah. Just don't call 100 times, because then you're going to drive me crazy. But
99 is okay, but 100 is no.
Right. So give us a call. Let us know what you think of the podcast also.
Yeah.
That phone number is
801-436-7838.
That's 801-436-7838. The paranormal hotline. Ghosts are standing by.
The Haunted Hotline. It has to be an alliteration. I'm all about alliteration. Paranormal Hotline sounds good, but it's not an alliteration. It's scientifically proven that alliterations are scarier. So it's the Haunted Hotline. Oh. See?
Hell's Haunted Hotline.
No, that's too much.
No, it's too much.
And I don't believe in hell.
Well, you know what they say. Hell is for children.
Is that what they say?
Well, Pat Benatar said it. Not everybody said it.
But I mean, what kind of an expert is she?
I don't know.
Well,
she was around in the 80s. That's all I know.
She has black hair.
Does she, though? I think it's gray by now.
Okay.
Oh, also, if you guys like this podcast, we need your help.
Yeah.
We need you to leave a review with Apple Podcasts. The vast majority of people who listen to our show listen through Apple Podcasts. And when a podcast gets a lot of ratings on Apple Podcasts, it kind of helps build the visibility of the show. So if you want to help us out, just go and give us a star review. leave an honest review because that's all we ask. And then if you like the show, tell a friend.
And if you hate it, tell 2 enemies.
Because the word will get out, and you, yes, you can be a super spreader of the word, of the podcast, of the creepy word.
And tell your dog I said hi.